Two matching twin beds sit side by side in the same bedroom, each made for one person, but clearly arranged for a married couple. In some American homes, this did not automatically suggest distance or an unhappy marriage. Separate beds were once promoted as cleaner, healthier, and distinctly modern. So why did some couples embrace them, and how did the same arrangement later become a symbol of emotional separation? The story begins with the health belief that transformed the marital bedroom. Thousands of 20th century American bedrooms. A married couple went to sleep beside each other, but not in the same bed. Two matching twin beds stood against the same wall, often separated by nothing more than a small knit stand. To modern eyes, the arrangement can look like an obvious sign of marital distance. Yet when these bedrooms became fashionable, many doctors, health reformers, furniture companies, and home designers presented them as something very different: clean, modern, comfortable, and even considerate. The beds were not the same as separate bedrooms. Husband and wife still shared one room. They could talk before sleep, reach across the space between them, or move the beds closer together. What changed was the mattress beneath them. Each person had an individual sleeping surface, separate bedding, and slightly more control over movement, temperature, and nighttime disturbance. Not every married couple chose this arrangement, and those who did were not all following the same advice. Some believed that sharing one bed meant sharing stale air, illness, body heat, or restless movement. Others simply liked the symmetry of a fashionable matching bedroom suite. For some couples, twin beds offered better sleep without requiring the expense or emotional separation of two bedrooms. Then the meaning changed by the middle of the 20th century. Movies and television had made the twin bed bedroom one of America's most recognizable images of respectable marriage. But the screen did not invent the real-life practice. It inherited an arrangement that was already decades old and helped turn what had once represented health and modernity into a symbol of censorship, restraint, and eventually marital unhappiness. So why did some married couples deliberately choose separate twin beds? Why were those beds once sold as an improvement over sharing? And how did a fashionable symbol of modern marriage become visual shorthand for a relationship that had grown cold? The answer begins before Hollywood placed husbands and wives on opposite mattresses, when sharing a bed itself became a question of health. Chapter 1, WHEN, Sharing a Bed, became a health cue ustion for. Much of American history, married couples shared beds for practical reasons as much as romantic ones. Beds were expensive pieces of furniture. Bedrooms could be small, cold, or shared with children and other relatives. In less prosperous households, choosing two matching beds for two adults might have been unnecessary or financially impossible. Separate sleeping was not unknown. Wealthy couples sometimes had their own bedrooms, especially in large houses with space to spare. Illness, pregnancy, work schedules, age, and personal preference could also change where family members slept, but separate bedrooms and twin beds were different arrangements. Separate bedrooms placed two people in different rooms, sometimes at opposite ends of a hallway. Twin beds placed them in the same room, usually side by side, with a narrow space or knitstand between them. The couple remained together while each person occupied a separate mattress. During the 19th century, that distinction began attracting attention from doctors, sanitary reformers, and writers on domestic health. The bedroom had become a target of reform. Advice manuals warned against heavy curtains, sealed windows, dusty carpets, crowded rooms, and thick bedding that trapped stale air. Sleep was increasingly treated as a biological process that could be improved through ventilation, cleanliness, temperature control, and orderly surroundings. Some health beliefs belonged to an older understanding of disease. Before the causes of many infections were fully established, foul or exhausted air was widely blamed for illness. Even after germ theory gained acceptance, older anxieties about breath, bodily emissions, and poorly ventilated rooms did not immediately disappear. A shared bed concentrated two warm bodies beneath the same covers. To certain reformers, that looked unhealthy. American physician and health writer William Whitty Hull argued in the 1860s that each sleeper should have an individual bed in a large, clean, well-ventilated room. Other writers warned that one sleeper could disturb another through movement, heat, breath, illness, or unequal physical strength. Some advice went beyond infection and comfort. Sexual reformers also promoted separate beds as a way to encourage restraint within marriage. These arguments reflected moral beliefs, not merely medical science, and they were never accepted universally. Many husbands and wives continued sharing a double bed without believing they were damaging their health. Medical advice itself was inconsistent. One authority recommended separation. Another accepted bed sharing between healthy adults. Family custom and available space often mattered more than any printed rule. Still, the health campaign changed how people could interpret a familiar piece of furniture. A double bed no longer represented the only natural arrangement for a married couple. It could be described as crowded, old-fashioned, difficult to ventilate, or disruptive to sleep. Twin beds offered a compromise. The couple did not need two bedrooms. They could remain close enough to talk, read, or reach across the space between them. But each sleeper had separate bedding, a separate mattress, and a defined area of air and movement. At first, this was advice about health. For twin beds to enter large numbers of American bedrooms, however, they had to become something people wanted to buy, and something newly married couples could imagine as part of a desirable home. Chapter 2. The modern bedroom came in PARS furniture. Manufacturers understood that two beds could be sold as more than a medical precaution. By the early 20th century, advertisements and decorating advice increasingly presented matching twin beds as a coordinated bedroom arrangement. The beds might share the same wood finish, metal frame, headboard design, and coverlets. Between them stood a matching table, lamp, or small cabinet. The room still announced that it belonged to a couple. The beds were separate, but they were visually paired. This mattered because twin beds could otherwise suggest a boarding house, hospital, children's room, or hotel. Manufacturers and interior designers had to make them feel appropriate for marriage. They did so by associating them with cleanliness, convenience, modern design, and personal comfort. Metal bed frames had already been promoted as easier to clean than heavily carved wooden beds with fabric hangings, smooth surfaces, washable bedding, open space beneath the frame, and fewer dust-catching materials fitted the language of domestic hygiene. Twin beds extended the same logic. Each mattress could be aired and turned separately. The narrower beds could sometimes be moved more easily for cleaning. Each sleeper could use different blankets or choose a different degree of firmness. But the arrangement also carried a social message. Marriage was changing in the way advice writers, advertisers, and middle-class consumers discussed it. The ideal of the companionate marriage emphasized affection and cooperation between two individuals rather than complete absorption of one identity into the other. Twin beds could make that philosophy visible. They were alike, suggesting partnership. They stood beside one another, suggesting closeness. Yet they gave each sleeper a private surface and a small boundary of personal space. The arrangement was together and apart at the same time. By the 1920s and 1930s, twin-bed rooms appeared in decorating magazines, architectural publications, furniture catalogs, hotels, rental advertisements, and model interiors. A 1929 American architectural publication described equipment that allowed twin beds or a double bed to be installed in the same compact opening, treating the choice as a normal planning decision rather than an eccentric custom. Newspaper room listings sometimes advertised twin beds as suitable for two people or a married couple. Such notices do not reveal how the occupants actually used the room, but they show that the arrangement required no elaborate explanation. It had become recognizable. This does not mean that twin beds dominated American marriage. No reliable national census counted whether husbands and wives shared one mattress. Photographs and furniture advertisements tend to preserve middle-class homes more readily than crowded or poor households. A room large enough for two beds required more floor space, and buying two mattresses, two frames, and additional bedding increased the cost. For many couples, the double bed remained practical, familiar, and intimate. Even among those who owned twin beds, the arrangement could change. Beds might be placed apart, pushed close together, or rearranged when someone became ill. A guest room could contain twins that were combined when a couple visited. Furniture sellers benefited from this flexibility. Two beds required more products, but they could also be marketed as adaptable. The same pair served children, individual guests, relatives, or a married couple. The appeal, therefore, did not depend on one single belief. Some buyers accepted health arguments. Some wanted fewer nighttime disturbances. Some liked the balanced appearance. Some followed fashion. Others inherited the furniture or selected what fit the room. What joined these motives was the idea that marital closeness did not require two adults to occupy the same mattress for every hour of the night. That idea would become most visible not in private homes, but on American screens. Before that happened, Twin beds had already become part of real domestic life, and the way couples used them was more flexible than the later stereotype suggests. Chapter 3. Married. Together and in separate beds, a twin bedroom did not necessarily feel divided. The two beds were often arranged as one coordinated composition. Matching headboards stood against the same wall. A shared knitstand occupied the center. Lamps, rugs, curtains, and bedspreads tied both sides of the room together from the doorway. The pair could look almost like one piece of furniture separated down the middle. For the sleepers, however, the difference was physical. Movement on one mattress did not travel directly through the other. One person could turn, rise early, or enter bed later with less chance of shaking a partner awake. Each sleeper controlled individual sheets and blankets. These advantages were real, even when the medical explanations surrounding them were exaggerated. The arrangement could also be useful when illness entered the household. Historical advisors sometimes treated separate beds as protection against contagion, although sharing the same room did not create complete isolation. The beds offered distance, not a medical barrier. Comfort could matter more than theory. One spouse might prefer a firmer mattress. Another might require extra blankets. Snoring, coughing, restlessness, or different schedules could make one shared surface difficult. Twin beds allowed a couple to address some of those problems without maintaining separate bedrooms. They also preserved access. The beds could be close enough for conversation and affection. Nothing in the furniture prevented a couple from sharing one bed temporarily or pushing the two frames together. Separate mattresses did not automatically mean a lack of sexual intimacy. That modern assumption would have puzzled some couples who chose twins, precisely because the arrangement promised both companionship and individual rest. At the same time, the beds could make marital boundaries more visible. A disagreement might be expressed by increasing the space between them. Popular fiction and comedy could use the narrow gap as a physical symbol, close enough to remain married, far enough to show irritation. The furniture, therefore, carried several possible meanings, and the couple, not the manufacturer, decided which meaning applied on any particular night. Daily maintenance introduced practical trade-offs. Two narrow beds could be easier to reach from both sides, but they also meant making two beds instead of one. Two mattresses required two sets of fitted coverings. The space between the frames could collect dust. A compact bedroom might become difficult to navigate once both beds and their accompanying furniture were installed. The arrangement was also connected to class and housing. A large primary bedroom could display a matched suite attractively. A small urban apartment might not have the width. Families dealing with housing shortages, boarders, or several children had less freedom to dedicate extra space to adults' sleeping preferences. This is one reason claims about what married couples used to do should be treated cautiously. The surviving evidence does not support one universal national pattern. It supports a real and commercially significant option that some couples adopted, especially when they had the space and money to choose between arrangements. Advertisements show what sellers hoped customers would want. Advice books show what reformers recommended. Movies show what producers believed audiences could accept. None of those sources alone reveals what happened in every bedroom. Actual household use was quieter. A couple could buy twins because a doctor recommended them, because a furniture suite looked fashionable, because one spouse slept badly, or because the beds came with the house. Years later, the same arrangement might remain. Through habit, even after the original reason had been forgotten, the beds were not automatically romantic or unromantic. Their meaning depended on the culture around them, and during the 1930s, American film producers began building a powerful new culture around the image of the married bedroom. Chapter 4. Hollywood did not invent the twin bed marriage old. Movies and television shows created one of the most persistent misunderstandings about twin beds. A husband lies in one bed. His wife lies in another. Between them sits a lamp, a telephone, or a knit stand. Positioned like a border, viewers often assume the arrangement existed only because censorship prevented actors from sharing a bed on screen. That explanation reverses the historical order. Twin beds were already present in health advice, furniture advertising, domestic design, and some real homes before Hollywood made them a standard visual convention. The screen did not invent the practice, but Hollywood did change what the beds came to mean. The motion picture production code adopted in 1930 instructed studios to protect the institution of marriage and treat sexual material cautiously. Its discussion of bedroom scenes warned that an innocent location could become suggestive depending on the dramatic situation. The published code did not contain a simple rule stating that married couples must sleep in twin beds. Studios nevertheless faced pressure from industry regulators, state and local censors, religious organizations, and exhibitors. A shared double bed could communicate sexual activity immediately, even when the characters were married. Twin beds provided a convenient solution. They identified the room as belonging to a couple while reducing the visual suggestion that the audience was being invited into the couple's sexual life. By the middle of the 1930s, industry guidance treated twins as the safest equipment for many married bedroom scenes. This was a production convention, not a survey of American sleeping habits. Movies used furniture as visual shorthand. A double bed could imply sexual possibility. Separate rooms could suggest wealth, estrangement, or secrecy. Twin beds occupied the useful middle ground, married, respectable, and intimate enough for dialogue, but physically separated for the camera. Television later repeated the image. Lucy and Ricky Ricardo were shown in twin beds on I Love, Lucy. Rob and Laura Petrie occupied separate beds on The Dick Van Dyke Show. The bedrooms differed in design, and the relationships were affectionate, but the paired beds became one of the era's most recognizable screen images. These programs did not prove that most American couples slept that way. They showed what networks and producers considered safe and legible. For a mass audience, the arrangement also offered comic possibilities. A character could sit on the edge of one bed while arguing with a spouse in the other. Someone could cross the gap during a reconciliation. Beds could be pushed closer or farther apart, turning marital tension into visible movement. Repeated often enough, the image began changing its own meaning. The twin beds that reformers had described as healthy and designers had promoted as modern became associated with restrictions on what film and television were willing to show. They started to look less like freedom for two sleepers and more like a barrier imposed between husband and wife. That change was not caused by censorship alone. Attitudes toward marriage and sexual intimacy were shifting at the same time. Advice writers increasingly warned that excessive distance could weaken companionship. Popular culture placed greater value on emotional and physical closeness between spouses. By the 1950s, the cultural argument surrounding the beds had begun to reverse. The double bed was no longer simply the crowded relic rejected by health. Reformers thought it was becoming evidence of a successful marriage. Chapter 5. How a modern bed became a sign of marital terribility. The backlash against twin beds intensified during the 1950s. A generation earlier, the matched pair could represent hygiene, equality, and modern domestic planning. Increasingly, writers and cultural commentators treated the same furniture as cold, old-fashioned, or sexually restrictive. Marriage advice had changed. The growing culture of marital counseling and popular sex education presented physical intimacy as an important part of companionship. A healthy marriage was expected to provide emotional closeness, sexual fulfillment, friendship, and domestic partnership within the same relationship. In that framework, the gap between twin beds could begin to look suspicious. The beds had not physically changed. The standard used to judge them had. Commercial developments supported the shift. American mattress makers promoted larger shared sleeping surfaces during the post-war decades. Queen and king-size mattresses offered couples more room without requiring completely separate beds. A larger mattress answered one of the strongest practical arguments for twins, that two adults needed more personal sleeping space. The new sizes did not destroy the twin bed market. Twin beds remained useful for children, guests, dormitories, hospitals, hotels, and flexible spare rooms, but their connection to the primary married bedroom weakened. Television preserved the older arrangement, just as many consumers were beginning to see it as a product of television restraint. The repeated image of carefully separated spouses helped twin beds acquire an air of artificial propriety. By the late 1960s, they no longer carried the same prestige as a modern choice for newly married couples. Furniture fashion, larger mattresses, changing sexual attitudes, and the screen stereotype all worked together. The decline should not be mistaken for complete disappearance. Some husbands and wives continued sleeping in twin beds because they preferred them. Others adopted separate bedrooms, which was a different and more expensive arrangement. Illness, age, snoring, shift work, caregiving, and individual sleep needs continued to shape private decisions regardless of fashion. The subject has become visible again because modern sleep medicine takes nighttime disruption seriously. Partner's movement, snoring, alarm, temperature preference, or schedule can affect the other person's rest. Contemporary research does not produce one universal answer. Bed sharing can provide comfort and emotional security, while also increasing awakenings or physical disturbance for some sleepers. Recent surveys show that many Americans sometimes sleep in a different room from a partner, but those findings should not be confused with a return to the historical twin-bed suite. Sleeping in separate rooms, sleeping in side-by-side twins, and sharing a divided mattress are different arrangements. What has returned is the old question: how should a couple balance intimacy with sleep? Modern products offer answers that earlier furniture makers would recognize. Split king mattresses place two independent sleep surfaces inside one large frame. Adjustable bases allow different positions. Separate blankets reduce pulling and temperature conflict. Two beds can be placed together or apart. The language has changed. The practical problem has not. Historical health reformers often overstated the dangers of sharing a bed. Screen sensors exaggerated the sexual meaning of one mattress. Later culture exaggerated the emotional meaning of two. None of those interpretations can determine whether a particular marriage is healthy. Some married couples chose twin beds because they believed the arrangement was sanitary. Others chose them because they were fashionable, comfortable, adaptable, or simply available. Many couples never chose them at all. They became associated with unhappy marriages only after. The culture around marriage changed after. Physical closeness became a public symbol of emotional success, and twin beds became linked to censorship, restraint, and an older domestic style. Return to the bedroom with its matching headboards and narrow table between them. At one time, that space did not necessarily represent distance. It represented a different promise. Two people could remain a pair without surrendering every inch of individual space. The beds fell out of fashion. The problem they tried to solve is still awake.